everybody. Thanks for coming. So I'm one of the teachers here, and I've got some experience in sample clearance. And JD asked if I'd kindly asked me if I expressed an interest in it, and he said, "Oh well, why don't you do it? Why don't you host?" So Seb, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we have a very special guest from the company. Just say I was very interested in what they do from the first time I read about them, and I think they are leading the way, offering a solution to a problem that we've had for a long time in the industry, and one of these new companies is very interesting to watch in terms of what they're doing and what they can offer for people who want to sample. So,
yeah, thanks.
Let's introduce yourself and the company.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So, yeah, my name's Seb. I work in the publisher and label relations for TrackLib. I've been there for about 3 months, so relatively new. And what I do is I work with labels and publishers, trying to get them on board, manage the process of the rights negotiation, getting them signed, and then managing those relationships going on. I'm also involved in the curatorial side of TrackLib, so we have quite a big emphasis on curation. So we're not trying to just bring in any old music. It's a strong feature of the site is actually good quality music. I've been working in the industry for about 15 years. For the most part, I was with a label called World Circuit, which is a world music label that released music like When It Was a Social Club and Ali Farka Touré and so on. And I was involved in all aspects of the label and publisher operations. And then more recently, I was with a smaller label called Analog Africa. Again, music from Africa and from South America, looking after their copyrights and sync, so getting their music in film and TV, and also trying to monetize their back catalogue. And it was there that I heard about TrackLib, because they approached us to see if we wanted to get our catalogue on board. And at that point, I just thought, like you thought, Tony, it's such a good idea to fix this sort of slightly knotty area of the industry that's difficult for both producers, music producers, and labels and publishers.
And in a nutshell, then, what would you say TrackLib do? What's their?
So, in a nutshell, what TrackLib does is it makes a system which is quite hard to access, that is complicated and expensive. It addresses all of those three things. So what we do is we're making sampling accessible, affordable, and straightforward, which at the moment, traditionally, it's none of those things. Yeah.
Can I ask the audience, how many of you have any of you tried to clear a sample before? Okay, so that's fine. That's no one. This points to something which is good. And how many of you are music producers? Make music. How many of you have sampled things? So quite a lot of you sampled things. So that's the use of someone's song and recording. They're not getting paid. You're not being sued. What would you say if they went through the normal route of trying to clear the sample? You have to go to the publishers, to get approval for use of the song, and you negotiate a percentage. And then you have to go to the labels who have the rights to the recording and ask them. Each party would have to go back to the artists and songwriters and check with them, negotiate, get a settlement if you got approval, and then agree an amount you'd have to pay. So that's quite a complicated and difficult process. How would you say TrackLib comes in? So we have this situation at the moment, which is largely unchanged, I'd say, from the point of view of producers who aren't having big hits at the moment, not clearing samples, using them, rights owners not getting paid, and nobody really benefiting.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it's really difficult for anybody really trying to get a sample license as it stands at the moment. You have to understand copyright in the first place, which it's taken me about 10 years to understand, how music rights work on the publishing and master side. So that's already quite a big ask, and then you have to find out who the rights holders are, and you have to find out how to contact them, and quite often they're too busy to deal with what to them might seem like a low value sample, because for the most part people aren't signed, and also particularly indie labels are so busy with all their frontline releases that they just haven't got the time to deal with sample licenses. I mean, they're interested in people sampling their music, they just simply don't have the time to then go through the whole process of explaining how it works and drawing up a contract and so on. So, and then what might happen, you might get that far, but they may refuse because they don't like the way you've used the sample. They might just think it's sort of cheapening the original sound recording. And so say if they do eventually give you approval, then what they might do is ask for quite a high advance. So ask for like an upfront fee, which is going to be quite hard for producers who are just starting out. So where TrackLib comes in is that the music is already, all of the music on the platform is already pre-approved. So when you choose anything you see on the site, you know at that point that you can get a sample license for it. It's not going to be refused. So firstly, that it provides that security that you're not going to waste your time working on a piece of music which is then going to get turned down.
Or can I just say that then, what I understand, I'm not a producer myself, but part of the problem is not getting refusal for the use, it's just not getting a response.
It could be, yeah, quite often you simply won't get a response.
So you're saying, I want to use your song, I want to use your recording, I want to do this legitimately, not make any much money, so I can't offer much, but I'd like, the right owners to be rewarded and this to be all legit. But it seems you almost literally can't do that.
You can't,
if you're a small user, so you guys, if you're putting music up on SoundCloud and you're trying to clear sample,
yeah,
sounds like you're not going to get much of a response.
Sure, yeah, that can quite often happen. And then what happens then is producers are just quite tempted to just think, well, I'll just put it up anyway. Yeah. And that does no good for anybody because, it's an infringement of rights. It causes problems further down the line. So quite a lot of the time, even now, like you'll see records by Dr. Dre or the RZA, they'll just get taken down because they'll realize that there's been a sample hasn't been cleared because fingerprinting can't pick up samples. So there can't be automatic takedowns of things. So people will, as you say, if they don't get the permission, which quite often is the case, they'll just put it out anyway.
So if you put out a track with a sample on it on SoundCloud, there's no automatic thing that would take
detection, it down? No. I mean, unless it was very, very clear, very, very distinct. Okay. But quite often producers will want to flip it or slow it down or speed it up, and then it becomes quite unrecognizable.
Okay, so we have a broken system, essentially, that's, certainly from my experience, I've had conversations with people about this problem going back literally 20 years. Along come TrackLib and say, right, we've got a solution for this problem, that rights owners get paid, you can clear things reasonably without having to lose money. And at this point, the music industry says, fantastic, we'll all sign up.
Yes. It's not quite been so easy. Yeah, the challenges to begin with when we first launched was that being a new technology, being a new platform, a bit like Spotify or something like that, rights holders are a bit nervous about getting on board because they don't have any way of knowing that there'll be a decent return on it, that their copyrights will be looked after. So initially that was the first hurdle. But since then, having
got more and more labels on board. It's given rights holders more trust in the platform. So it's getting a lot easier on that front. But the main thing that would stop a label actually getting on board is, well, there are two things. Firstly, if they've got really high value tracks that are being sampled a lot, say if it's James Brown,
Right.
then a rights holder is going to think, hold on, no, we don't want to make this available for this for pre-cleared licensing at a fixed fee, because they can be getting, quite large sums of money for those samples. So they don't want to commit with that kind of catalogue. With that being said, we do have Isaac Hayes and like Tina Turner and Bob James and so on. So it's not to say the quality is not there, but some labels will hold back.
Can you just tell us then about something like Isaac Hayes? You all know Isaac Hayes is pretty much sampled, soul legend. How did that come about then?
Well, that was before my time, so I couldn't tell you exactly how that happened. But it's been great because we've got the masters, we've got the sound recordings, but we've also got the multi-tracks. So something that we try and do is always get the multi-tracks, because producers want to be able to work with stems and so on. It makes it a lot more, as you'll all know, like a lot more usable. So, but it's been very successful for him and for his label and publisher and so on. So,
was this a major publisher, or does this go through any majors, or are these all independents?
Independents, yeah.
So, so you've got a lot of the independents on board. Can you go to them and say, give us some of your catalogue if you can't give all?
Well, yeah, no, that's quite often what we do. We're not always asking for the real an entire catalogue, and actually, quite often we don't want the whole catalogue. We only want the stuff that we think that will work. So there's a bit of give and take there. Us asking for catalogue, and then sometimes they might want to deliver us stuff which we really don't think is going to work. So at that point, we have to say, well, it's not going to be worth, quite honestly, your time or our time.
And who decides that then?
We've got a curation team who spend their time going through catalogues, listening to music, and making decisions on that kind of stuff.
How do you judge then? That's just a difficult one.
Well, I think it's having a good ear, really, having a good ear, like understanding what it is producers might be looking for. A lot of the time, it's organic, vocals, bass lines, and again multi-tracks where all those can be separated out. So, and there are some genres that just do really well, like 70s soul and R&B, especially in hip hop. So when you've got some, really classic 70s soul, that's going to do really well. But we do also bring in all sorts of other genres. So we, it goes from 70s soul right through traditional Chinese folk songs, through to even like the sound. We've got field recordings of crickets chirruping. So there's quite a range of genres, but to answer your question, it's really a matter of just having a good sense of what's worked before and what you think might work in the future. And the curators on the team, they're musicians and producers themselves.
Oh, okay, right,
yeah,
right. So, roughly how many tracks have you got on then?
So we've got about 120,000 tracks.
Okay, wow.
And 600 plus labels and publishers so far.
And so from the user's point of view, can you just talk us through how you would use it? You said, okay, I want to make a beat.
Yeah, sure. So you pay a subscription. It's a subscription model, and there are different tiers to that. But the entry tier is $5.99 a month. So then once you've paid the subscription, you have access to the site. And once you're on the site, you can browse the catalogues. And the way that we've organized the catalogues is it's great for producers because it can be filtered for the genre, for the era that it was recorded, the BPM, which pitches it in, so you could say, I want, 80s pop vocal in A minor, the BPM, and really filter down like that. So that's how you discover the music. And then we also put together lots of collections that will be inspired by like Wu-Tang or whoever it might be, similar tracks, tracks that have been sampled by artists like that, or indeed have been sampled by artists like that. So it's not like you reach a blank page like a Spotify search bar and think, goodness, I don't know what I like. There's a lot goes into discovery. So so once you've found the track that you want to use, you download it and you get it in like a uncompressed file, and then you can put that into your whatever software you're using and play around with that. And then once you've decided how that you want to use it, that you think, I want to use this sample, then you start the sample license process. And at that point, you have to pay for a sample license fee. And these range from, there are 3 categories. Category C is $50 and B is $500 and A, have I done that right? Sorry, A is $1,500, B is $500 and C is $50. These are all in dollars.
Right.
But it's really important because I think to a lot of people, $1,500 is like, it's a lot of money to pay for an upfront sample license fee. But 98% of our catalog is all in category C. And the reason why we have those categories is so that labels, when they deliver their music, they can decide what value they think it is.
Okay.
But we always encourage it to go and see. So if you're visiting the platform, you'll find that 98% of it is category C, which is great. And we're actually looking to slightly shift the model so there's much more emphasis on that.
And the money you pay, so it depends on the original song, which category it is, and what else then?
So then it's the length of the sample. So say if you've used like up to 2 seconds or up to 15 seconds or up to 30 seconds, that will then determine once you've paid the license fee, that calculation determines how much of the derivative, how much revenue from the derivative you'll pay back to the original rights holder. So you've found a track, you've paid the license fee, which is normally $50, and then once you've got the sample license, any money that you make from that track, be it putting it on vinyl, putting it on Spotify, wherever, a portion of that has to be paid back to the original rights holder. So you're committing to pay back a share of that income. And I'm talking about the sound recording side now, so the master side. And on the publishing, you're at the same time as agreeing to give a share of the derivative on the master, you're agreeing to give a share of the publishing split.
So can I just ask this point? Do people know about clearing a sample, about clearing the rights to the song and the rights to the recording? And don't worry if you don't. Would you like to explain just take away from the TrackLib, go away from moving away, the basic process of, okay, found this James Brown record, love it, want to sample it. What do I do?
As in, how do you, TrackLib or?
No, not through TrackLib, just saying the normal sample clearance procedure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I laid it out before. It's approach the rights holder, negotiate a sample license with them, pay in advance, and then you would also be then expected to pay over a share of the revenue from that new derivative. And
that's for the recording.
That's the recording.
So you want to use the recording. You're saying, I'm actually taking this recording, embodying it in my new recording. For that, you pay a fee. A license
fee. Well, deals can differ.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, there'd be an upfront license fee that could be recoupable or not. It would depend on the type of deal.
Right. And then points on the record, or
there'd be a share of revenue from that.
Right.
From that track.
So from the recording, you have to clear the rights of the master rights owner, the record label, pay them some money up front. As an advance against
income. It could be, or it might be non-recoupable.
So you've got that side, but then you've also got the fact that you have a separate right to the song itself, and if you're using that, there's a completely separate negotiation. Yeah.
On the publishing side, yeah, exactly. So you need to speak to the publisher of the song, and quite often the songs, as you'll know, will be written by several people, and so those writers will be might be represented by different publishers. So then you've got to get an agreement with several different publishers because there are several different writers on the song. Another reason why TrackLib is so handy, because you don't have to go through that process. You could have upwards of 10, 15 writers on a song.
Yeah.
In a worst case scenario, which gets very complicated.
And so just to be clear, then you've got to pay for, if you're using the recording, you're actually sampling it. You've got to pay for the recording in advance, and as you pay up front in advance. And for the publishing side, you've got to get permission, which would come back presumably from the songwriters themselves ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah.
All the songwriters have to agree, but then you don't pay an upfront fee, do you? You pay a percentage. You pay a percentage
while you agree to give over a share in that new derivative.
Right.
So you would give over sort of 20, whatever it might be, so that then the way that song is registered is the original writers plus the person who's put together the new song.
So is everyone clear on that? Because it's a complicated business.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway then is so if you're covering a record, if you're just doing a cover of a song, all the publishing money goes to the original songwriters.
Exactly, yeah.
But if you're adapting it, you negotiate, and a percentage of it you retain, and a percentage of it goes to the original songwriters.
Exactly.
So it's not, you don't risk losing money if you're putting out the music yourself on the publishing. But on the master's side, on the record, you have to give an upfront fee, which is presumably where it kind of differs.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And if you replay a sample, you don't need to record the recording, but you still need to clear the rights of the publishing, yeah?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So, really complicated process. Fine if you're Beyonce and you've got a team of lawyers and what have you. If you're independent artists, trying to put out music and seeing how it goes, this sounds prohibitive.
Yeah, really prohibitive. It's so hard for all the reasons we've laid out, from comprehending it to making the right connections with people, being able to negotiate, paying upfront fees and so on, then finally possibly even being turned down because it's not approved.
Or never hearing from them again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this system then, which works for big artists, kind of works for very small artists, because nobody, as in, if you're not generating much money, am I right in thinking it's unlikely someone's going to come after you and say, we're suing you because you used a sample on SoundCloud?
Yeah, no, that's very unlikely to happen. It's only when it starts making a lot of money. And that's what some producers might think. I think, well, I'll just do it until it starts making money.
Right.
So that is one way that it happens.
But then once it starts making money, you've got the problem, it's already in there and you don't want to let it go.
It's already in there, yeah. And also then, because it's an infringement, when the original rights holders come to you, you're not in a very good position to negotiate, because you've basically broken the laws of copyright.
Yeah. Does anyone know the sort of, what is it? The Bittersweet Symphony? This cautionary tale. So they sampled for was it that song? Yeah. A track, and this was coming out on Virgin, a big release, and it was actually a cover of the song "The Last Time" by the Rolling Stones, and the publisher. So I'm not sure what happened, but they didn't approach for clearance until the record was sort of being promoted and played on the radio. So the publishers said, we want, he said, I want 100%, as in I want to treat your record as a cover of my song, even though there's entirely new lyrics, entirely new melodies. They had no choice. They had to say yes, either that or don't put the record out. So they lost all the rights to the song. They still get money from the recording, but they've lost all the rights to the song.
Yeah. I think
which is a nightmare scenario you don't want.
I think what they've done, though, recently is actually give it back. They've said...
I had heard that, yes.
Which is quite nice.
I think the Rolling Stones. But that would have come from the Rolling Stones, not the publishers. They were like, don't want to do that. So, TrackLib then sounds like a great solution. Firstly, how have you found it dealing with the rights owners then? Yeah,
on the whole, very positive. Rights holders who can really see the value of making decent income on catalogues, because we were talking about this just before we came in about there's a stat somewhere that only 2% of recorded music is actually making any money. 98% of it is dormant. I don't know how much truth there is in that, but more or less I think it's representative of the fact that labels back catalogues aren't making much money. You can get money through sync, but they can be few and far between. And also you can make money on sample licensing, but again, few and far between, especially because it's quite a complicated process. So
do any of these rights owners try and do it themselves? Do they
do sample licensing themselves?
No, don't mean that, but I mean promoting, saying, hey, come and sample our stuff, we'll make it easy.
Some people do, yeah. I've been talking to a jazz label recently called Edition Records, UK jazz label, and they're putting together beat packs and they're pulling out loops that they think would do well, and then they're promoting that out to the producer community to sort of try and catalyse interest in their catalogue that way. So some rights holders are doing that. For the most part, I don't think so. So they're once they see that value, and they also see the value in the fact that we promote their catalogues to audiences that they wouldn't have otherwise reached. Okay. So, like, it could be, let's say, Analog Africa. It might be reaching an audience that wouldn't normally be listening to 1970s Afrobeat. So there's a lot of promotion there, and also there's a huge amount of editorial on the site around. So we'll write label features, we'll write producer features, we'll do various bits and pieces that promote the catalogue, but also promote. Secondarily, it promotes the labels as well. So they're seeing actually quite a lot of return on that. And for some labels, it's becoming, or it has become, the number one source of income for them.
Really?
Yeah. So because there are the three sources of income. There's the income on the downloads. There's the license fee that we talked about, and then there's the income on the derivative. Right. But actually, nobody's downloading music anymore because of Spotify. But with TrackLib, you do actually download. So. Okay. That is actually becoming a quite a good source of revenue. So for the most part, labels are pretty up for it, especially when they see that we've got some brilliant labels on there now that so they kind of just think, well, if they've done it, then these guys have done their homework. This must be working out. So there's momentum building up. But yeah, the thing that does hold some rights holders back is the fact that they don't have approval over the new track that a producer makes. But there are a couple of holdbacks in the agreement. So songs can't endorse weapons manufacturing or alcohol or tobacco products and things like that. So there are a few.
But there's no limit to how successful the track could be.
No.
So you mentioned Kendrick Lamar as an example of a user.
Yeah.
How did that come about then?
So Kendrick Lamar was using TrackLib to find samples, and he found again 1970s soul record, and got the sample through TrackLib, and that we just popped up. There it was, and
I was like somebody in the office made aware, saying, "Hang on a second, this user's check this out."
I wasn't around the time, but I think it may have been something like that. So. And then that was on his latest album. Yeah. It's a track called Father's Time. And then J. Cole used TrackLib to get a sample on a track called Middle Child, which has gone 7 times platinum now. But otherwise, the producers that we're working with include, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, DJ Khaled, 2 Chainz. I mean, it's just huge, Redman. It's a huge list of really top producers. So we're basically seeing it being used from people who are just starting out, just in their bedroom working out how to do sampling,
right
up to major label signed artists. So a whole range.
And have you had any of the majors or larger indies saying, you know, I mean, they not quite where do we sign, but expressing an interest, saying, yeah, well, actually, we maybe, you know, some of our catalogue, maybe some of our tracks?
Yeah, well, I can't talk too much about that, but there are conversations being had, and BMG, whilst not being, you know, by definition a major, it's you know, we're working with BMG's catalogue, and yeah, we're working with some big publishers as well. So we actually make agreements with big publishers so that the songs that are in their catalogue, the songs that they represent, they can quickly get cleared because we already have an agreement with them.
So what happens then when you've got a track by some artist and you've got the rights, but the publishing is with Warner Chappell? How would that work if you wanted to use it? Right.
Well, we would, quite simple. We would make an agreement with both sides. So make agreement with the major, or if I'm coming from a label perspective, then TrackLib would go to the publisher and make an agreement with them, and that's happened quite a lot. Or actually directly with writers, we make agreements directly with writers as well.
This is for prior approval then, or is this once somebody says, right, I want to use this?
So, well, if a label or a publisher have agreed to have their copyright on TrackLib, then that's approval given.
And do you need to have all masters and publishing prior approved before putting it up on the site?
Yeah, right. Nothing would get into hot water if we were putting up tracks that, you know, haven't been cleared. And
the publishers are on board then with this?
Yeah, they are. They receive a share which is equal to the share on the derivative as far as the split goes.
Okay. So if it's a 50-50 on the masters, it's just a 50-50 on the publishing.
Exactly, yeah.
And obviously the publishing, you don't actually pay. Publishing is, you know, if you're putting out the music, that will be paid by SoundCloud or you know, or whoever's playing the track or whoever's releasing it. So you're not, as an artist, as a producer, you're not as concerned about the publishing side.
No. So up front, the publisher's not getting the same level of income. But, you know, if the song's a hit, then that's when they start to see income on mechanicals and performance and sync and things like that.
Okay. How do you see it? Because part of me, when I think of a service you're providing, I see it as not that different to, you know, the first collection societies. People sat around saying, well, we should collect money from everybody performing our songs. Problem is, we can't, because, you know, we'd spend our lives talking to every radio station and pub and club in the country, negotiating. So they say, okay, well, let's set up a performing rights organization. We can license them en masse. And no prior approval. So the downside is Liz Truss wants to walk out to your song, you can't stop her. The plus side is you get income from all the performance. And there seem to be companies that are moving in this direction with different uses. Would I be right in thinking that's how you see yourselves?
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing you're talking about like blanket agreements for TV use and things like that, for sync.
Or just prior approval, or like so library music. So if you want to use music in a film or an ad or something like that, you can go to a publishers and say, negotiate in the same way and negotiate the rights to the record company. Or you can go to a library where it's all prior approved.
Yeah. So that's happening in that space. It's also happening in the sample space. So there's sites like Splice. And,
okay, so this is what I was going to want to. So people like, do you know companies like Splice and BeatStars? How do you see TrackLib fitting into that world?
Well, I mean, the thing that's different between us and them is that their music's all royalty free. So it's all like Tony explained. It's already pre-cleared. There are no royalties to be paid on it. But it's been created with this idea in mind. It's been created to be put on one of these sites. So you know, in my opinion, I think it lacks the real richness and beauty of music that's been recorded, you know, like in the 70s during, you know, certain periods in history, or, you know, because music comes from, you know, emotional experience and so on. So original music, which is what we make available, has, I think, got more life in it, it's more vibrancy. And it's also just, it's better quality music, really. So the difference between us and them, we're doing the same thing. The only difference is that ours is original music and theirs is being sort of created in a kind of studio for that explicit reason, to be sampled.
Right.
And whereas you might find some nice beats in there, nice samples and so on, it can't quite beat, you know, a nice old original recording.
Did you, I don't know if we can get examples, you had some, because I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, because that's one of the first things I saw on TrackLib, that these amazing videos showing some sample uses. I don't know whether we can...
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Ah, there we go. So, do you want to...
That it should rule your life. We're just people being people.
I love all
trying to survive. There's just one thing that's worth all the trouble.
Just on the creative side. There's a lot, I know this track, there's a lot in there. This is a more deep one, yeah.
Such things as halfway crooks, scared to death and scared to look. They shook, cause ain't no such thing as halfway crooks.
On the creative side then...
How did the inventor of the clock know what time it was?
There's an incredible amount that seems to be done. I mean, you know, we've come a long way from the days of Puff Daddy sampling a big track from the 80s and having someone rap over it. Do you think that sampling's got a lot more creative?
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. I think that we're seeing more and more producers sample across like so many different genres now. It was most exclusively in hip hop, but now it's really it's reaching out in loads of different areas. And I think with TrackLib now, with the ease of access and so on that we've discussed, the affordability and the straightforwardness of it, I think people are going to there'll be more and more producers being happy to sample. I mean, there are some producers who've never considered sampling, and now they're using.
Who doesn't? Who will never be sampled?
Who would never allow themselves to be sampled?
Yeah.
Well, people like Michael Jackson and.
So Michael, they've had like Pretty Young thing, and there's been a few of those.
Right. Oh, sorry. As far as TrackLib goes, yeah.
No. I mean, people who just will not
flat
be
out
sampled.
refuse.
Yeah, just.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. There must be some artists out there who just.
I don't think I've ever heard the Beatles sampled. So.
No. Yeah. Well, that's probably a good example.
And what about if you went to a Nile Rodgers or somebody who's just sampled and sampled and sampled to death, and offered like a bespoke window? Is that the kind of things you could offer?
On the platform?
Yeah.
Well, we do, you know, what we'll do is, you know, like with Bob James, for example, we'll run like a big feature on Bob James. We did some interviews with him and other producers who would, because he's the most sampled artist in all time,
really?
Mostly in the hip hop community.
So does anybody, do you know who Bob James is? Anyone? So if you were into jazz funk, you would. If you were into sampling and you were a bit of a nerd, you would.
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah.
And just to give a bit of background, so Bob James, he had this track, "Take Me to the Mardi Gras." If you know it, but it was so popular in the early days of hip hop, people would rap over it. That it had it was known when rappers rapped over this. You know about this. It was they'd talk about it as "he's rocking the bells." Because there's an a-go-go bell or something in the thing. And so LL Cool J, an early hip-hop artist, he came out with a track called Rock the Bells. That's what he was talking about. It was such a well-known track in hip-hop circles that there was a phrase for people who rapped over it.
Right.
So he comes to you, TrackLib, or you come to him and say...
Yeah, he was really on board with it right from the word go, from what I understand, because he'd seen that there'd been such success with his music being reused to make you know, new standalone pieces of music, which he felt quite inspired by himself. So he was, as a creator himself, he could really see the value in it, because there was quite a lot in sampling. People originally were very anti it. They thought that it was theft. You know, even if it was properly licensed, they thought it didn't have any credibility and so on. It didn't have any creativity to it. But he actually discovered that his music was being sampled just by chance. Like his grandson called him up and said, "Oh, like your tune's number one is being used in a number one track at the moment." And so initially he was quite dismayed, but then once he got all the right agreements in place and so on, and then could see the benefit of it, he's really happy, and that's why I think he's embraced TrackLib, because he realizes that if people don't get access, if people can't do it in a legit way, they'll do it illegally. So he's just really cottoned on to that and realized that this is actually a really good thing.
Amazing. And I guess last question, then how would you see the future? Because I've said it kind of reminds me a bit of sync, as in music for TV and film and games, and in until quite recently, certainly until the sort of 2000s. Again, it's a similar use. You have to get prior approval. If you want to use the recording, you have to go to the record company. If you want to use the song, you have to go to the publishers. And if you haven't got much money, it's going to be very difficult. If you're putting out a big, TV ad campaign, you can't do it without clearing. You'll get sued. If you're doing your cousin's wedding video, no one's going to sue. And publishers, and I can remember, I'm old enough for the early days where publishers were like, and record companies really didn't want people syncing music. And in fact, I think it was actually Nick Oakes. I don't know if you were here last week. I wasn't here, but he gave a talk. He's head of sync at Sony. He told me once that the first time there was an award at Music Week, which is like the industry awards. The first time they had an award for best sync, when they got up to collect the award, they were booed by the other people in the room.
Wow.
So the attitude to sync was very much, if you really want, you're willing to pay enough and you're rich enough, you can do it. And then publishers sort of started going, oh, hang on, this is a source of income. We could promote it. Do you think that are we nice to think that maybe rights owners would think of sampling in the same way? Yeah,
I should think so. I mean, we are seeing that they're seeing the value in that, but I think they have seen the value in sampling for a while now. I don't think it's if there's good money on the table, it doesn't take much to convince a publisher to agree a sync sample license, assuming that the artist gives approval. So it's not so much them being resistant. It's just the actual, as we've discussed, the process, which is so hard of getting sample licenses sorted because they're so time consuming and because publishers are so busy and so on. So this is that's where the challenge is actually just creating a ease of access.
Right. Yeah, I remember talking to somebody ages ago who was doing sample clearances. One person, this was EMI Publishing years ago. And I said, why don't you promote some of your old catalogue for samples? And she was looking at me and saying, do you have any idea? I don't get to home till late in the evening. Do you think I want to encourage this? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So you're taking the process that you're making it easier. Easier for rights owners, easier for people. It does seem like a what's not to like.
Well, exactly, yeah, and that's what when I first heard about it, I was just like, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. I can't quite see why it wouldn't work for some people. So, apart from the approval process.
Okay, actually, one more question then. Is there a danger? And again, this is probably something you as music makers could answer, that when you sample a record, is part of the appeal the fact that it's a bit illicit, a bit uncleared, a bit slightly illegal? The hunt, they still talk about crate digging. Nobody actually literally goes through crates. Well, they do actually in America. But is there a danger that you say, no, here's all the samples, go on, help yourself, knock yourself out, that you take some of the magic out of it?
Yeah, a bit like legalizing cannabis. It's less exciting.
Yes.
But there is something in that, and all the feedback that we get is really positive. But if there's one thing that's slightly negative, people on socials will say, there's this kind of art. Well, there are two parts to what you're saying. There's the crate digging and there's the illicit nature of it as well. But the crate digging aspect, people say, look, I used to actually have to really search this stuff out. Yeah. It was like a real passion for me to spend my weekends going through dusty collections of records to find this one sample that nobody else had ever heard before.
And now there was some record fair that used to be in New York or something, where basically if you went there, all the hip hop producers were there. They were literally all this one fair, just trying to get there before the others.
Yeah, so there is that. But the way that we've built the site, it's still it's encouraging that sense of discovery, of actually finding something yourself. And as far as the illicit side goes, I couldn't say. I think there will be some people who would not, that's why they were doing it. They don't want to do it anymore. But for the most part, we only see more and more people sampling now. I think it was, to end on a stat, in 2021, it was 14% of recorded music in the Billboard charts contained samples. 14%. Wow. Just to show quite how much sampling is still very much alive, and I think it's only going to grow.
Fantastic. Questions? Any questions you'd like to ask?
Hello. Yeah. So you mentioned before that about doing a cover. If you do like a cover and you really make it your own and stylize it, that you can actually get a percentage of the publishing rights to it. And I was just going to ask, if you did a really stylized cover, say a rock cover of a Whitney Houston song or something, how much might you expect to make realistically, percentage-wise? Right.
So, I mean, this is outside of sample licensing, but I know that area quite well. So, if a song's covered, then the actual publishing remains, 100% of the publishing remains with the original writer. So, if you cover a song, you'll never actually make any income on the publishing side. but you can make money on the master side. So on the actual sound recording. Well, the mechanical rights would be on the publishing side. On the sound recording side, on the track side, you'd make money from the downloads, from vinyl sales and things like that, but you wouldn't be making any publishing income.
Not from recent downloads. You don't mean streaming. I mean, it's got to be download. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, it'd be so if you did a cover of a song and then you released it on Spotify and you put it on vinyl and you put it on iTunes, whoever uses iTunes, I don't know, but then you would make money on the income made from that side of it, but on the publishing side, so mechanicals, performance, all of that, you wouldn't see any of that. That's why, like writers who have written big hits for like Elton John or Michael Jackson, because those songs get covered so much, they keep making money. Because even though it's been recorded by somebody else, they make money on the publishing side.
Okay. So if you cover a song, by and large, this original songwriters, so they own the song, you'd be hard pushed to go to a publisher and say, look, I've already changed it around.
Right, yeah, sometimes if you have, to go back to that question, if you were to really significantly change it, then there could be scope for you to get a share of the publishing.
Yes.
Yes.
You would need permission.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask a question. So, say for instance, you have like a label that approaches you guys to get a clearance for something that you don't have on your catalog. Once it's cleared, does that stay on your catalog, like for other people to then get pre-approval kind of thing?
So do you mean? So I've understood the question. Do you mean if somebody created like a new track, would that then be on the platform?
No. So for instance, I don't know, someone like the RZA, because you mentioned him earlier. He likes some like outlandish samples on his music. Say for instance, something that you guys don't have on your catalog, he approached you guys and said, like I want this. Right, yeah.
Well, I don't know if we've had, it's a good question. I don't know if we've had somebody come to us and say, it would be great if you had that, could you go and get it? And then I'll use you. I don't know if that's happened, but I think if it was we would definitely we would listen to producers, especially like the RZA, and try and do that. And what we do is we've got like a VIP program where we've got a pool of high profile producers that we are in dialogue with, who they're telling us like, giving us advice saying, be great if you got some like Indonesian funk from the 70s or soul from Mongolia or something, then we'd think, we'll do that. So yeah, we do. And then if we did get those rights, then it would hopefully stay on the site. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more, just two more questions. Yep.
Good evening. Say I'm a music producer, right? And I have made my own beat pack, my own sounds. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to get it on TrackLib for anyone else to use them?
We don't do beat packs. We've had a couple of labels come to us and producers as well actually, and say, look, I've actually got this amazing collection of beats, but we don't at the moment. We don't do that. We don't put beat packs on there. That's more for splice and endemic sound, things like that. But that's not to say it won't happen in the future, but I don't think there are any plans at the moment.
Okay. So you're at the back. Question? Is it no more? No. Yep. No.
Right. If you got a sample from 1920.
1920?
Yeah, 1920s.
Right.
Would that still be like, in the copyright?
So it's a really good question. So there are copyright rules that are different for each territory, and it's dependent on the recording side and on the publishing side. And after a certain number of years, I don't want to say exactly because I'm not quite sure. I think it's on the master side after it's been released.
After it's been released, yeah.
It's been released. Then on the publisher side, a certain number of years after the writer has died, then that track falls into public domain, like copyright free. So I think that you can then use that, but I'm not completely sure about that. I'm no expert on things that have fallen out of copyright, but it might be the case.
Yeah, I think usually, imagine the recording would be out of copyright, but the song, I remember the copyright on the song lasts till 70 years after the last composer's death. So sometimes things you might think are way out of copyright actually surprise you, but those are the kinds of things you'd want to check.
Yeah.
Depend on the track. Yeah. Okay, I think that's everything. JD, do you want to come up and... No, proceeding? No. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Seth from TrackLib.
Thanks.